I had worked the Threll Reserve Garden Dome for 4 years before I ever saw the Vethra growth move on its own. That was the rule, and I never questioned it. The dome sat at the edge of the reserve like a glass blister pressed into the hillside, and inside it the growth filled the back wall floor to ceiling, a slow architecture of root and bloom, gray-green and faintly luminous along its veins, older than anything the Calvaracy had records for. Sanoa Vern had grown up 4 kilometers from this exact patch of soil and had still never touched it with a bare hand. Nobody had. The doctrine was older than the dome itself. Skin contact with the Vethra triggered a paralytic transfer within 3 seconds, full neural shutdown inside 2 minutes. Children were taught the count before they were taught to swim. Sanoa wore the same heavy ceramic gloves I did every day without fail, and she told me once, almost embarrassed, that she still flinched a little reaching past a frond even gloved. My job was simpler than hers. I cataloged rootstock samples for the Compact's terraforming survey, logged growth rates, ran the soil chemistry. I didn't carry the weight she carried. To me, the Vethra was a slow, patient, faintly beautiful problem in a lab coat. To her, it was something closer to a god you didn't pray to because you were afraid it might answer. We worked the dome in 8-hour rotations, the 2 of us mostly, sometimes a third tech rotating through from the main station. Sanoa had been assigned here straight out of her doctoral cohort, the youngest researcher the reserve had ever certified for direct contact work, and I think part of why she was so good at the job was that she had grown up close enough to the old stories to take them seriously without letting them stop her hands from moving. She told them to me sometimes, on the long, quiet rotations, how a whole village 3 valleys over had been relocated 2 centuries back rather than build anywhere near a Vethra root line, how the gloves we wore were modeled on a design that hadn't meaningfully changed in 11 generations. I used to tease her, gently, that she'd memorized the warnings better than the chemistry. She'd always say the warnings were the chemistry, as far as her people were concerned, and she wasn't wrong to say it. The tremor came at midday, while the canopy light was at its brightest through the dome's upper panels, a deep ground shudder that the reserve's geologists later blamed on a settling fault 2 ridgelines over. It lasted maybe 4 seconds. It was enough. A hairline crack ran up the containment wall behind the growth's main mass, and through that crack the Vethra did something I had never once seen it do in 4 years of watching it sit perfectly, monastically still. It moved toward the light. Sanoa was closest, logging a bloom count with her tablet propped against the crack itself, and a forward surge of root mass came through faster than either of us could step back. It didn't strike her. It wrapped slow, almost gentle, the way a vine takes a trellis around her right forearm and gloved hand, and then it held, and then it began, very calmly, to tighten. She didn't scream. Calvaracy don't, not when it matters. She said my name once, flat and controlled, and told me to get the antitoxin kit from the side locker. I was already moving before she finished the sentence. The side locker was sealed behind the same containment door the tremor had jammed. I put my shoulder into it twice and felt it give nothing. The override panel blinked amber, then red, and stayed red. Through the dome's curved wall, I could see the reserve's response beacon already lit, which meant help was 11 minutes out by the posted response time, and Sanoa's glove was already showing stress whitening at the wrist seam where the pressure was building. I want to be clear about what I knew in that moment, because afterward people asked me if I'd had some plan, some piece of buried research nobody else had. I hadn't. What I had was one offhand thing Sanoa herself had said to me 8 months earlier, half joking over a soil sample tray that the old field survey logs, the ones from before doctrine hardened into law, claimed the growth didn't kill out of malice or chemistry alone. It tested. It read resistance. A struggling limb registered as a threat, and the grip and the toxin transfer followed automatically, the way a thorn closes around movement. But nobody in 400 years of written record had ever held still against it long enough, bare-skinned, to find out if the second half of that old story was true, that stillness read differently. That the count of 3 seconds for poison was real, but so, supposedly, was a longer count on the other side of it, if you could survive not knowing. I have thought about why I did what I did next more times than I can count, and the honest answer is that I didn't decide it the way you decide things with your whole mind. My hand was already at my glove's wrist seal. I pulled it off. Xenoa told me to stop. Her voice cracked exactly once, on the second word, which was the only time in 4 years I ever heard it crack. I didn't stop. I pressed my bare left palm flat against the central node of the growth, just above where it held her arm, where the root mass was thickest and oldest and felt, under my hand, less like bark and more like something with a pulse 2 registers below hearing. It was cold first. Then it was a fine, bright, prickling cold, climbing from my palm up through my wrist, and every part of my training screamed that this was the 3-second mark, that I should be losing motor control about now, that I was watching my own hand for the tremor that meant it had already begun, and there was nothing left to do but count down with it. I held still instead. I didn't pull back. I didn't grip. I let my hand lie open and loose against it the way you'd let an animal smell you before it decided whether you were a threat, and I counted, out loud, low, mostly for myself. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing failed in me. The prickling sharpened into something almost like the growth was reading the lines of my palm with pressure instead of light, searching, deciding. 5, 6. Xenoa had stopped struggling, whether from training or from watching me, I don't know, and the grip on her arm eased by some small, deliberate fraction, like a hand loosening its hold on a doorframe once it trusts the floor underneath. 7, 8, 9. At 10, the cold reached a kind of peak and held there, sharp and bright as a struck bell, and I felt something at the center of my palm pull tight once, like a single stitch being drawn through skin. At 11, it let go. All of it all at once, Xenoa's arm first, then my own hand, the whole mass of root growth withdrawing back through the crack in a slow retreating tide, folding itself back into the dark the way it had come, leaving the dome quiet and bright with afternoon light, as if none of it had happened. Xenoa's glove was crushed, but her arm beneath it was unbroken, the skin reddened but whole. She sat down hard on the floor of the dome and didn't say anything for a while, and neither did I, because I was looking at my own palm. There was a scar already forming where the stitch pull had been thin, silver-white, perfectly spiraled, no wider than a fingernail paring, already cool and bloodless and entirely without pain. It has never faded. It is on my hand right now as I tell you this. What the response team found, and what the reserve's senior archivists confirmed over the following months, was that no Calveracy record in 400 years contained a documented case of sustained bearskin contact with the Vethra growth that ended any way but one. Mine was the first. The doctrine wasn't rewritten so much as it was quietly, carefully amended. A single clause added, citing my scar by catalog number, stating that prolonged stillness produced an outcome the prior model had never tested for, because no one had ever been willing to be the test. A delegation came out from the Capitol the following season, mostly archivists and 2 senior clerics who'd spent their whole careers teaching the old count to children, and they asked to see my hand the way you'd ask to see a relic, not a wound. I let each of them look. None of them touched it themselves. That habit hadn't changed, and I didn't expect it to in one season. But they wrote it all down properly this time, with my name spelled correctly, and the count of 11 seconds entered as a verified figure, rather than a discarded rumor from a pre-doctrine survey log nobody had trusted in 200 years. Xenoa touches my hand sometimes, when we're working a sample tray together, 2 fingers tracing the spiral the way you'd touch a scripture you'd been raised to fear and had just been handed proof was kinder than you'd been told. I let her. I don't feel much in the 2 fingers nearest my thumb anymore. A faint, permanent tremor, nothing more. It's a small enough price for what it bought her, and for what it changed in a doctrine 400 years old. I still wear the glove every day on shift, same as always. I just know now what's underneath it, And so does everyone who comes through that dome and asks to see the scar before they'll believe the story.